Hi guys, so today we're gonna talk about balayage for different face shapes. Before we go and discuss the face shapes, and as you know I have slightly different viewpoint on face shapes in general, there is one thing that is more important than the face shape itself. And I'm gonna tell you this thing later. Now we're gonna see first what types of balayage exist. So balayage is a hair coloring technique with darker roots and lighter ends. This is basically the techniques on how to do highlights on your hair. So there are loads of techniques on how you can achieve that effect. There are also different effects that you can achieve. But I still decided to divide them into several groups so we would see the difference. And by knowing that, we're gonna see what it does to different face shapes. So what kind of balayage exists? Number one is big or low contrast in colors. So as you can see here, the difference between dark and light is very little. The sun does pretty much the same thing with our hair, right? If we make this picture black and white, we won't see big difference between light and dark areas. So this is a low contrast balayage. High contrast balayage. When we see big difference between the roots color and the ends color. Normally in this case, the roots are really brunette, like brown, dark brown, black. The ends are light or even white. And of course there are loads of contrast types in between, so it's always a gradient scale, but at least you can now see the difference between those and you can place it somewhere on a gradient scale. Does it influence on our face shape? I would say yes, but not as much as high contrast. High contrast does influence on the face shape more. We basically place shadowy parts on certain places and replace lighter parts on certain places to create a certain shape that would influence on the way our body looks in general. In some cases, the change is not super dramatic, but in some cases, that can change a lot. Second type, rich highlighting or sparse. Rich highlighting, meaning they normally take bigger amount of hair and making them lighter. And so the stripes, whether you don't see them at all, they're so wide, or they're really wide, the stripes on the hair. And the opposite thing to that would be sparse, meaning maybe baby lights. So those light stripes, they're coming from nowhere and they're very thin and they're further from each other. And again, many things in between. And also I just wanted to mention that we're not talking about those crazy teenage experiments where they can basically do anything with their hair. Number three is the ratio between dark and light areas and plus the length of the hair itself. This is also important when we talk about how to work with that particular face shape. That's important. 1 or 2 decades ago, the ratio was probably pretty classic. They would take about 1 inch from the roots, depending on the length of the hair, of course. And recently they started to make a lot of experiments, so sometimes they even start very low. Roots are grown up to here and then you have just some of that bleached ends, which also can look cool, but we're gonna talk about that in the end. Number 4 is a technique. Technique can be very precise. You can literally see the stripes of very precise lines. On the other end of that gradual scale, that would be melted technique. That would be very gradual melted gradient. Your eyes even can't notice when does that highlighting point starts. And again, many things in between. Number 5 is how small or how big highlighted parts are. And I'm not talking about how far those baby lights are from each other. I'm more talking about the size of the stripe. They can be loads of them, baby lights, but very close to each other. So she still looks blonde, but if you look closer, the amount of hair is much smaller. They're very thin, and they can be pretty huge. Just make thick stripes. And number 6, where they place the highlighter. And of course it's obvious, they place it lower than the roots, right? They don't place it on the roots, just on the roots, and then they blend it to darker parts. Again, we're not talking about those crazy teenage techniques. We mean in general, because sometimes 1 centimeter closer, 1 centimeter further, it can make a difference. And balayage type number 7, I call it vertical balayage or horizontal. What I mean by that, that is just a technique on how you place the light and dark. So in vertical balayage, you place dark long triangles or light long triangles or light stripes, and some darkness in between shines through. That creates vertical lines, because we talk about light and shadow, light and shadow. There can also be horizontal balayage. This is when we have roots, and then those roots are very gradually go into light part. as if you fully colored your hair before and then it grown and you have naturally grown roots. Which in the 90s looked like you still didn't make it to go to the salon this month. And now it became kind of one of those trendy techniques. They make it look as if it was grown, but the difference here is they still blur that line, so it would not be so straight. Something that I have now. I have some verticalness, but that dark area is all somewhere here. It doesn't shine through here. And then I have this light part. So what is not important for us is the tone of hair. Is it ashy? Is it golden? Is it reddish? Is it brownish? We don't care about that now because the tone itself doesn't do anything with the shape and with the proportions. How light and how dark that is, that does influence. But that's a contrast. That's the depth of color. It's not a tone. So that's a different characteristic of colors. If you want, you can watch my video Color Theory where I talk about that. So the technique is the most important characteristic when we talk about face shapes. Okay, so now let's talk about face shapes. People talk about those different face shapes like round, oval, oblong, trapeze, triangle, heart-shaped. But it's not the most important characteristic. The most important area is the hair area. So that is my viewpoint. This is what I would do if I was a hairdresser. When I look on different women, I would not look on their face shape first. First, I would ask her to make her hair slick and make a ponytail in the back. And I would just look on the shape of their head. And the most important area for that purpose is the hair area. You can see that hairline, right? So in the middle of that hairline, you can see that point. You look straight on the person. You don't look from the top or from the bottom. Straight like on the passport. And then you notice where's the top of their head. That area we call hair area. So that hair area can be bigger or smaller. After I looked thousands of pictures of women, I noticed that most common, the size of hair area is normally a half of the size of the forehead. So if that hair area is half of the forehead size, normally it looks like she already has some volume on her hair. Now let's imagine that each and every one of you has this area same size as the half of your forehead. So in this case, you might feel lack of volume of your hair if your face is wider. So if you have round face and this size of hair area, you might feel like you don't have enough hair area. You might feel like you need to back comb. You might feel like your head is too flat, which is not the flat itself. It's just it's slightly wider. That's why that area seems slightly smaller to you. And same with oblong faces and slimmer faces. If it's slim, then this area can look even bigger, but there can be even more interesting proportions. For example, a girl can have a oval face, but she can have pretty small hair area. Maybe she has pretty high hairline, I don't know, maybe she has a big forehead as she thinks, and pretty small hair area. She also feels lack of volume, and she feels like her head is too flat, or she can feel like her face is not oval enough, it's too round, but in fact, this is just that hair area is slightly smaller than the half of her forehead. So she might feel like she needs to add something on top. I personally think that's a false idea, and I love girls with big forehead, even with a small hair area. When they do their hair slick and they go, I think it looks amazing. There can be different situations. There can be girls with rounder faces, but they can have pretty big hair area, which kind of elongates their head that direction. And when they make their hair slick, you can see pretty much of that area. Or maybe their hairline is pretty low. Like Kylie Jenner, for example, in her case, her face is on a wider side. She has pretty low hairline, pretty small forehead. That creates that roundness more on her face, but at the same time, that creates much more hair area here. So even when she's doing slick hair, that still looks high, just because of the way how the head is shaped, you know? So that is more important from my viewpoint when we talk about what kind of balayage we have to do for this or that person. And also there can be just girls when their hair area is bigger than the half of the forehead. It might make their face look longer that direction than that is probably. Also some confusion about face shapes, as I noticed sometimes. If you saw my video Glasses for the Face Shapes, you could see how I explain those different faces. For example, oval face can be just sharper. We can see the bones it's pretty skinny. The bone structure is sharp, but it's still oval. But it can be soft. So these girls might feel they have round face, which in fact they have just oval but soft face. Same with wider faces, some people can have pretty wide part here, but it can be just soft, right? Or it can be sharper. So first let's talk about women who feels like that hair area is not enough for them. They always feel lack of volume on top. They feel like their top is flat. So they always try to add some volume on top. In that case, the coolest balayage technique, the light parts should go from here, from here, from here. And they should turn around to the top and stop somewhere here. There will be light spot here, so the light will fall down and will reflect. It will make your top higher, of course. About 1 inch from the roots or a bit smaller. You can stop here. You can stop here. You can stop here. If that stops somewhere here, that will make your top lower. Here's going to be dark roots part, and it will not reflect light. So the light will stop reflecting from these parts, and that flat top will be even more flat as a contrast. The funny part here is, if your darker area goes from the roots, goes here, 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 up to here, let's say, and then you start having those light parts from here, that won't create that effect anymore, because from that area of your head the light will reflect evenly, and that will create that vertical line by your face, and then we don't care what's happening below here. So if you do the light parts here, that already should be fine. The most important thing here is you should keep in mind that that part of your hair should not be lighter than the ends. In this case, we ruin the whole idea of balayage. If the girl feels like she has a lot going on here, huge top, huge head in general, she wants to make it more flat, she can highlight her hair up to here, the closest to the roots, the closest, or lower here, or lower. If the light parts start below the chin and this part is darker, then it can create vertical line more by the face. So that might not work as much as a corrector of the proportions, but still can look nice. Don't try to correct things if they should not be corrected. I'm only talking about the cases where with dark and light shadows you can make it slightly more disproportionate than you are. And that's what I'm trying to point here.